And that's when they announced it. November 2025. BRICS plus nations quietly began testing gold-backed settlement units for cross-border trade. Not a press conference, not a grand declaration, just a pilot program launched in the shadows while the Western financial media ignored it completely. By Friday, this system could be operational at scale. And if you think that's hyperbole, let me show you exactly what's been built while you weren't paying attention. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus recent additions, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, now represents 45% of the global population and over 35% of global GDP when measured by purchasing power parity. This isn't a fringe coalition anymore. This is half the world's economy coordinating an alternative to the dollar system. And the mechanism they've chosen to bypass the dollar isn't another fiat currency. It's gold, physical gold, backing a digital settlement system that allows members to trade without ever touching a US dollar. Here's what that actually means. Right now, if Brazil wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, the transaction happens in dollars. Brazil converts reais to dollars, Saudi Arabia receives dollars, converts them to reals. The U.S. banking system intermediates the entire trade. Washington sees every transaction. U.S. sanctions have veto power over the entire process, but with a gold-backed BRICS currency, Brazil can convert reais into gold-referenced digital units, transfer those units to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia converts them into reals or keeps them as gold claims. No dollars, no U.S. banks, no Washington approval required. The dollar just became optional for $28 trillion worth of annual trade between BRICS members. And that number is about to explode as more countries join the system. Let me give you the framework for why this is the most significant monetary development since Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. Because this isn't just about trade efficiency. This is about the complete restructuring of global power. For 80 years, the dollar has been the mandatory middleman in international commerce. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system made the dollar the only currency directly convertible to gold, and every other currency pegged to the dollar. When Nixon ended dollar-gold convertibility in 1971, the system didn't collapse, it evolved. The petrodollar agreement with Saudi Arabia in 1974 ensured that oil, the most critical commodity on Earth, could only be purchased in dollars. This created permanent global demand for dollars. Every country needed dollar reserves to buy energy. That demand allowed the United States to run enormous trade deficits, print money without immediate inflation consequences, and impose financial sanctions that could cripple entire economies. The dollar wasn't just a currency. It was the operating system of global trade. And whoever controls the operating system controls the network. But that system has three critical vulnerabilities, and BRICS has identified all three. Vulnerability 1. Trust. The dollar system relies on confidence that the United States will remain stable, fiscally responsible, and won't weaponize access to dollars for political purposes. All three of those assumptions shattered between 2020 and 2024. The U.S. national debt exceeded 120% of GDP. The Federal Reserve printed $5 trillion in 2 years during COVID, triggering inflation that hit 8%, the highest in 40 years. And in February 2022, the U.S. froze $300 billion of Russia's foreign exchange reserves as punishment for invading Ukraine. That last one was the breaking point. Every central bank on Earth realized in that moment that dollar reserves aren't actually reserves. They're hostages. If Washington decides you're an enemy, your dollars disappear overnight. Russia had been preparing for this since 2014, which is why they'd already converted most of their reserves from dollars into gold. When the sanctions hit, Russia's gold, sitting in vaults in Moscow, was untouchable. And that gold became the foundation for Russia's proposal to back a BRICS currency with physical metal. Vulnerability 2. Efficiency. The dollar system is expensive and slow. Cross-border payments take days, involve multiple correspondent banks, and extract fees at every step. SWIFT, The messaging system that coordinates dollar payments is controlled by Western institutions and can be shut off as a sanctions tool, as Russia discovered when it was ejected from SWIFT in 2022. BRICS nations have already built an alternative. The BRICS Pay system, designed to facilitate instant settlements using central bank digital currencies and, critically, gold-backed units. No SWIFT, no correspondent banks, no Western control. China has been testing this infrastructure through its cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, since 2015. Russia has its own system for transfer of financial messages, SPFS. India has the Unified Payments Interface, UPI. These aren't hypothetical systems. They're operational, processing billions in transactions, and now they're being integrated under the BRICS framework. Vulnerability 3. The impossible trinity. The dollar system forces every country into the same monetary policy cycle. When the Federal Reserve raises rates to fight U.S. inflation, capital flows out of emerging markets, their currencies collapse, and they're forced to raise rates too, even if their economies need stimulus. They import America's monetary policy whether it makes sense for them or not. A gold-backed settlement system breaks this cycle. Countries can manage their own monetary policy for their own economic conditions while using gold-referenced units for trade settlement. The system becomes multipolar, independent, and immune to Federal Reserve decisions. These three vulnerabilities, weaponized trust, inefficiency, and forced policy convergence, are why BRICS has spent a decade building an alternative. And gold is the linchpin that makes it viable. Now let me show you exactly how the system is being constructed, because this isn't theory. This is operational infrastructure being deployed right now. The BRICS gold-backed currency isn't a physical coin or paper note. It's a digital unit where each token represents a claim on a specific amount of physical gold held in a distributed network of central bank vaults across member nations. Think of it as a digital gold certificate, but instead of one central vault like Fort Knox, the gold is distributed across BRICS central banks. Moscow, Beijing, Delhi, Brasilia, Johannesburg, plus the newer members. This distribution means no single country controls the system, and no single point of failure exists for sanctions or seizure. Here's the elegant part. Each BRICS nation contributes gold to the pool proportional to their economy size or trade volume. China, with over 2,200 tons of official gold reserves, and likely thousands more unreported, anchors the system. Russia contributes over 2,300 tons. India adds 800 tons. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, with their massive gold holdings acquired over decades of oil wealth, provide additional backing. When you add it up, BRICS plus nations collectively hold somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 tons of official gold reserves, potentially more when you include unreported stockpiles. At current prices around $4,300 per ounce, that's between $1.1 trillion and $1.7 trillion in gold backing. Now compare that to global trade. BRICS internal trade, commerce between member nations, exceeds $5 trillion annually. If even 20% of that trade shifts to gold-backed settlement units, you're talking about $1 trillion in transaction volume backed by over $1 trillion in physical gold. A 1-to-1 backing ratio. Full convertibility. That's stronger than the dollar has been since 1971. The dollar has zero gold backing. It's backed only by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, a government running $2 trillion deficits with $36 trillion in debt. The BRICS system is architected exactly like the pre-1971 dollar, except with modern digital infrastructure and distributed custody. It's Bretton Woods rebuilt for the 21st century, except this time the anchor isn't in Washington. It's distributed across the global south and east. Here's how a transaction would work in practice. Let's say India wants to buy crude oil from Saudi Arabia. Under the current system, India converts rupees to dollars, pays Saudi Arabia in dollars, Saudi converts to rials. Multiple currency conversions, multiple fees, multiple days of settlement. and every transaction passes through U.S.-controlled banking infrastructure. Under the BRICS gold system, India's central bank converts rupees into gold-backed digital units at the current gold-to-rupee exchange rate. Those units are transferred instantly via the BRICS payment system to Saudi Arabia's central bank. Saudi Arabia can either keep the units as gold-equivalent reserves or convert them into riyals at the gold-to-riyal rate. Settlement is instant. No intermediary banks. No exposure to dollar volatility or U.S. sanctions. And most importantly, both sides of the trade have confidence in the value because it's backed by physical gold that can be audited and, if necessary, physically delivered. This is why Russia has been the loudest advocate for this system. They've already been forced to operate outside the dollar system since 2022. They've been settling some trade with China in yuan, with India in rupees for rubles swaps, and directly in gold with certain partners. They've proven the concept works at scale. Now they're systematizing it for the entire BRICS bloc. China is the silent executor. While Russia makes the political argument for de-dollarization, China builds the infrastructure. The digital yuan, China's central bank digital currency, has been in development since 2014. Over 260 million Chinese citizens now have digital yuan wallets, and the digital yuan is designed to be interoperable with other BRICS digital currencies, and critically with gold-backed settlement units. China isn't doing this to promote freedom or multipolarity. China is doing this because they hold over $3 trillion in foreign reserves, much of it in dollars and dollar-denominated assets, and they've watched the U.S. weaponize the dollar against Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and others. They know they're next if tensions over Taiwan escalate. So they're building the exit infrastructure before they need it. Saudi Arabia is the geopolitical earthquake. For 50 years, Saudi Arabia has been the cornerstone of the petrodollar system. The 1974 agreement that required oil sales in dollars was essentially a deal between Washington and Riyadh. Saudi Arabia prices oil in dollars, invests its surplus in U.S. treasuries, and in return receives military protection and political support. That deal is fracturing. In 2023, Saudi Arabia joined BRICS+. In 2024, Saudi Arabia began accepting yuan for some Chinese oil purchases. And now, Saudi Arabia is participating in the development of a gold-backed BRICS settlement currency. If Saudi oil becomes available for purchase in gold-backed units, the petrodollar dies. Not immediately, not completely, but the mandatory nature of dollar usage for energy trade ends, and when that pillar falls, dollar demand collapses structurally. Every country that currently holds dollar reserves to buy oil would suddenly need fewer dollars. They'd need gold-backed BRICS units instead. And to get those units, they'd need to either acquire gold or trade directly with BRICS members in local currencies convertible to the gold units. This is why the BRICS currency isn't just about trade efficiency. It's about replacing the dollar as the global reserve currency by offering something the dollar can't: tangible backing and political neutrality. Now here's where the timeline accelerates, because the infrastructure I just described isn't 5 years away. It's being tested now, and the plan is to scale it rapidly. In late 2025, BRICS nations quietly announced pilot programs for gold-backed settlement. The details were sparse, intentionally. No big summit, no dramatic headlines. Just technical announcements buried in central bank reports and trade ministry statements. Why the secrecy? Because if this system launches before the U.S. can respond, it becomes nearly impossible to stop. Once trade flows begin routing through the BRICS gold system, once companies and banks integrate the payment rails, once countries start holding BRICS units as reserves, the network effects take over. The dollar's dominance isn't enforced by law, it's enforced by inertia. Everyone uses dollars because everyone else uses dollars. But if a critical mass of the global economy shifts to an alternative, that inertia reverses. Suddenly everyone needs the new system because everyone else is using it, and BRICS has the critical mass. 45% of global population, 35% of global GDP. The largest oil exporter, Saudi Arabia. The largest oil importer, China. The largest gold producers, China, Russia, South Africa. The fastest-growing major economies, India, UAE, they have supply, demand, and the resources to back the currency. By Friday, and I'm using Friday as a rhetorical device for imminently, not literally this coming Friday, this system could reach operational scale, meaning BRICS members begin conducting a significant percentage of their trade in gold-backed units instead of dollars. When that happens, several things will occur simultaneously. Dollar demand will decline sharply. Central banks currently hold dollars to facilitate trade and as reserves. If trade can happen in gold-backed units, the need for dollar reserves diminishes. Countries will begin selling treasuries and converting reserves into gold, or BRICS units. Treasury yields will spike. U.S. borrowing costs will explode. Gold prices will surge. If BRICS members are acquiring gold to back their trade settlements, and if other countries want to join the system, or simply want the optionality of being able to use it, global gold demand will increase by hundreds of tons annually on top of the already record central bank buying. The supply-demand imbalance will send gold toward $10,000 per ounce or higher. The petrodollar will collapse. If Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other oil exporters accept gold-backed BRICS units, the requirement to hold dollars to buy energy ends. The 50-year foundation of dollar dominance, oil priced in dollars, gets dismantled. The geopolitical implications are staggering. U.S. influence in the Middle East evaporates. OPEC becomes irrelevant as a cartel. Energy markets reorganize around the new system. Currency wars will intensify. The U.S. will not go quietly. Expect aggressive dollar defense measures. Capital controls proposed. Pressure on allies to reject the BRICS system. Sanctions threats against countries that adopt it. But the U.S. is constrained. They can't sanction half the global economy. They can't freeze China's reserves without triggering immediate retaliation. The leverage Washington had over smaller nations doesn't work against a coordinated BRICS bloc. The financial system fragments. We'll end up with two monetary spheres, a dollar zone, U.S., Europe, close allies, and a gold-backed BRICS zone, everyone else. Trade between the zones will require currency exchanges and will be more expensive. Globalization, as we've known it for 30 years, unwinds. Supply chains reorganize along geopolitical lines. This isn't speculation. This is the logical endpoint of the infrastructure being built and the geopolitical tensions driving it. Now let me address the obvious objection. If this is so inevitable and so close, why isn't it everywhere in the news? Why aren't financial markets panicking? 3 reasons. First, the changes are technical and boring. Central bank digital currencies, settlement systems, trade finance mechanisms, this stuff doesn't generate headlines. It's not dramatic until it's operational, and by then it's too late to stop. Second, Western media and financial institutions are institutionally blind to this. The assumption of dollar dominance is so deeply embedded that alternatives are dismissed as fantasy. When Russia proposed a gold-backed BRICS currency, Western analysts laughed it off as propaganda. They're not laughing anymore, but they're still not covering it seriously. Third, BRICS has every incentive to downplay this until it's ready. Announcing we're going to overthrow the dollar before the system is operational invites preemptive attacks. Better to build quietly, test thoroughly, and launch at scale before Washington realizes what's happening. But the evidence is hiding in plain sight. Record central bank gold purchases for 3 straight years. BRICS expansion to include major oil exporters. China and Russia settling trade in yuan and rubles. Digital currency infrastructure deployed across BRICS nations. Technical working groups on cross-border payments meeting regularly. Gold reserves repatriated to domestic vaults. These aren't random events. This is a coordinated strategy being executed in stages, and we're in the final stage before launch. Look, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't know your situation. I'm not telling you to buy gold or sell dollars. I'm showing you what the largest economic bloc on Earth is building, and what the implications are when it goes live. The BRICS gold-backed currency isn't about making dollars obsolete overnight. It's about making them optional. And once they're optional, the network effects that sustained dollar dominance for 80 years reverse. Countries will ask, why do we need dollars if we can trade directly in gold-backed units? Why do we need to hold treasuries if we can hold gold or BRICS reserves? Why do we need to accept U.S. sanctions if we operate in a parallel financial system? And once enough countries ask those questions and act on the answers, the dollar's reserve status ends. Not because of a conspiracy, not because of war, but because a better alternative existed, and the world chose it. By Friday, again, Friday as metaphor, the BRICS gold system could be processing a meaningful percentage of global trade. And when that happens, the century of American financial dominance will be over, replaced by a multipolar system where gold, not the dollar, is the ultimate arbiter of value. The reset isn't coming. The reset is here, and the only question left is whether you're positioned for the world that emerges when the dollar loses its throne.